And now they can see you. You can start.
Hello.
We still got attendees coming in.
Yeah, might have a couple people coming in. All right, I'm ready to start when you are. Oh, apparently not. Sorry. Marty, are you ready?
Yeah, let's give them a couple more minutes, maybe start at 2:05. We had a couple more people join.
Sounds good.
Now, do my Zoom windows show up in the share as well, or are they hidden like right here? Adam?
Yes.
Do the participant list show up in what you guys seeing on my screen, or is that just private to my screen?
No, it's just private to your screen.
Okay, that's good. I didn't want to block stuff. All right, I guess we can go.
Sounds good. There you go.
Yep. All right, for today's symposium topic, we'll be discussing using Power BI for competitive data analysis, visualization. And we have some use cases and personal stories about this. I'm Marty Schlafer. I'm currently the lead mentor for T-Model 1746. I've been mentoring since 2023. Christian and I believe, started mentoring at the same time for T-Model. And, you know, it's been quite the adventure since then, going to Worlds in 2023. And then the split of our groups, the one that remained with the high school, 1746, and Christian went with Team Bean, 1833, which had a very successful district championship this year, winning. So Christian, you want to tell me a little about your background?
Yeah, my name is Christian. I've been doing FRC since the 2015 season. I was on 1746 as a student, class of 2018. And then I came back around 22, 23, and came back as a mentor because I really appreciated what FRC did for me. And since then, I've done supply chain analytics professionally, and I'm currently in school for data analysis as well. So yeah, I guess that's me. Yeah, so just to start, kind of going to go over a little bit of what some other presentations may have done, but basically scouting is important, especially now. How you collect, store, process data, how you analyze that data, and what you get out of it is all really important. Back when I started scouting, the first year was 2015. We would use paper scouting, literally just a piece of paper, maybe some information to fill out and draw tally marks. And then we would go back to our hotel if it was a travel event, and we would add up all of the tallies, and try to gather as much information as we could from that, in order to make some of the decisions we'll talk about later. Um, that's not necessarily always a bad method, though it may be a little outdated compared to some of the options that are out there today. But at the end of the day, all we're really looking to do is make decisions as informed as possible about, both for matches and for creating an alliance during alliance selection. And then Marty, if you want to go through some of the benefits.
Sure. When I first got involved with the robotics club at Forsyth Central, we see the immediate benefits of a team exercise, and related to physics and engineering, STEM stuff. What I didn't see at the beginning, because I was new to it, was that these students are also getting experience with other aspects, like business aspects of budgeting, going out and procuring sponsorships, completing grants, and even into this side of strategy and scouting. They're using critical thinking outside of STEM, but in gameplay type scenarios. So we see benefits from them learning how to collect data, curate that data, clean it up, transform it into some meaningful information, and use that as part of gathering and creating a strategy and executing to that strategy. And then in industry, now they're able to see, just instead of a grid or sheets of data in Excel, they can actually make a story that tells something that's going on. For example, this is a scenario for FRC. If we had battery, an intelligent device hooked up to battery, and there was Adam and his father, our moderator for this thing, created a device that actually, when the batteries are charging, it can watch the charging cycle. So if you're able to collect that data and graph it out, you can see batteries that are falling off, and might be more susceptible to brownout during one of your things, one of your matches, and reduce the risk of that by knowing ahead of time that this battery might not be fully charged, even though it's showing a particular number. So there's things in industry. When I was in an assembly plant, for example, they had computer feedback from particular devices. So when a car was going through the manufacturing plant and there was a specification for torque on a particular bolt that was getting bolted to the chassis or or the engine frame or whatever, it would record what torque it had hit when that bolt was tightened down, and that was recorded. So if something was out of spec, they could come down the line later and catch it in a repair cycle. So there are a lot of benefits with just collecting data, analyzing data. How can you use that and execute against it?
Awesome. So next, getting into, maybe some of the FRC side of things, the data analytics is really for answering competitive questions, right? and there's a lot of different questions that we're gonna have to answer, and you won't always know what questions you're gonna have. Some examples that we put up here, right? How often does this team do a climb? That's frequency. How long does it take for them to do the climb? How many points does that team add to our score? And if we pick them, what are our other options? These are just some small portion examples of what you can answer. Some of the ones that we're going to be talking about as well, mainly like how many pieces do they score? Where do they pick up from? Those are the types of questions. Also, you get to do some comparisons between teams. Obviously, it seems very basic, but it's always important to know. If you have one team that does 6 scores per match and one team that does 4 scores per match, generally you're going to want to pick the team that has 6 scores per match. There are also options for making predictions. If you know how many points your opponents are probably going to score in a normal situation, and then you can figure out how many points you're going to score, you can kind of figure out, do we have the advantage and do we want to leave things the way they are? Or are we an underdog and we might have to try some new things? Or is it a close match and we really just have to perform? These are questions that your other teammates, if you're working on scouting and strategy, these are the types of questions that your teammates might come up and ask, right? And then that'll lead you into making decisions based off that information. One of the really important parts of decision making is having the objective truth, right? What can you actually point at and say, this is true when you're making a decision? Instead of just saying, well, I think team ABC is able to score more than team DEF, prove it. Have the data that objectively you've collected and said, I am looking at this objective information and it says that they score more pieces. That doesn't mean they're always going to score more. People have good games and bad games. But for the most part, you can take a really good educated guess and base that guess in truth, in data, instead of just relying on intuition alone. Do you want to go ahead and go through this?
Yeah, I can take this one. So data tools, we can break down the topology of data from acquisition through the actual reporting, starting with collection. Do we build versus borrow? So you can do manual collection, obviously, aka paper. And in fact, in 2023, we were using paper to collect our scouting data. Since then, in 2024, we built a custom collection app. Many teams have followed suit and done that as well, where you build it on iOS or on Android platforms, some tablet, maybe a phone, and it collects the data, and then you can take that data from each of those individuals and collect it into one master data store. There's public data out there. First Robotics and the Blue Alliance have APIs to collect data from them in near real time. There's some delay. It might be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but it's reliable to some standpoint as long as you can get an internet connection while you're at the competition. And then the last, and it's becoming more prevalent now, is co-scouting. So maybe your team doesn't have access or the bandwidth to create a custom app and do all this. So instead, you, in the spirit of FIRST, do some cooperation, and you provide scouts to another team, and they provide you with the tablets, and then you collectively work together in getting all the scouting data. A benefit of that is it reduces the inaccuracy of the data. The more eyes and the more people you have collecting the data, the more likely you're going to go get a better version. Whereas if you had one person per robot, or even with manual collection, you have transcription errors. I know my son's handwriting has gotten better over the years, but it's still what I call chicken scratches. It's very hard to read as sixes. Sometimes they look like zeros. So you can imagine having to be the person that collates that data into your database or spreadsheet and reading a piece of paper and having 5 different people write their numbers and comments differently. Data store and reporting. The data that we gather, it's a lot of data for an event, but it's not so large that it wouldn't fit in Excel or Google Sheets. So a lot of people, a lot of teams collect it, drop it in Excel or a CSV or into Google Sheets. Some others actually have a local database on their laptop that does all the collating the data, and they use Microsoft SQL Server Express, for example. The last part is how do we get meaningful analysis of this data, and that's the visualization layer. And so our team used Power BI. We looked at Tableau at one time. Other teams are currently using Looker. We ended up going with Power BI. It was easy to learn, and it was free for desktop. If you want to publish your dashboard or your report out to the internet, then you're going to have to pay for a tenant and or subscription for a Microsoft tenant and additional fees for Power BI.
All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the data points, which is basically what information are we collecting? Some examples up here again: scoring, climbing, intaking, and additional details. And a really important part of this is going to be identifying your team's resources. How many people do we have scouting? How much experience do we have? You know, how during a competition, sometimes we think we have a lot of people for scouting, and then something breaks on the robot and 4 of your scouts go into the pits. It happens, but you should really be fully aware of how many people are going to be able to fully dedicate to scouting at one time. If you have more people, you get to add more details, more complicated measures, right? An example of this in climbing. At the very basic, you should know if there's a climbing or an end game, how many times do they climb or successfully do that end game. If you have more resources, maybe a more custom app, right? On paper, you don't really want to be marking how long it takes them to climb. You really just want to be, check mark yes or no. Whereas if you have a custom app, it may be easier to track a more detailed, how long does it take them to climb? Are they starting their climb at 15 seconds or 5 seconds? Are they pushing it? Do they have some time? That information would be more valuable, but you have to make sure that you're staying accurate and you have the resources to ensure accuracy as best as you can whenever you're collecting data. So it's a bit of a balance between your team's resources, the level of detail you want to go into, and keeping that accuracy. Those are the kind of different variables you're trying to balance. Did I see something in the Q&A, or was that?
Yeah, someone asked a question. It's how many people would you recommend on each match for scouting?
Well, Well, a solid, it depends. Thank you for the question. I would say it's best to have at least one person per robot at a time. If you have less than 9 people for an entire event, I would look at grouping up with a team that maybe is nearby you or you're familiar with some of the people who do scouting on their teams. I know being us 1833 at some of our district events, we were low on students and we collaborated with a few other teams, had them come in a little bit early, train on our app so that they were familiar with how we were doing scouting, and then shared that results data with them at the end because we wanted more people to be able to do that. If you have a lot of data that you're trying to collect, if you're with like a very, very large team, 8866 comes to mind off the top of my head traditionally. If you have a very large team, you might even consider doing 2 or even 3 people at a time per robot. You can use multiple data points and check the accuracy. Check the accuracy of that data if you have more. If you have, I would say less, again, if you have no other resources, maybe there isn't another team that you're working with, and you just have 2 or 3, I would say that your best option would to be switching to a visual scouting only approach where you have maybe 1 or 2 data points that you really care about. In 2023, I would say, put one person on each alliance and have them measure just the amount of scores that they do. The amount of pieces they score was the most valuable data point. And if that's the only thing you're focusing on, right, moving the slider in the balance, if you only focus on that piece of data, one person can accurately count 3 robots, but you really have to limit the amount of data that you're collecting at that point. But it is possible. It depends on the game as well. Some games is easier to scout and some games are harder. You always have to take that into consideration as well. Hopefully that answered your question.
All right, so we want to talk about visualization. That was the key for this this symposium talk here. So the purpose, why are we creating the visualization of this data? And we have a anecdotal story for that. Christian will get into in a bit. What insight is it supporting? What is the content? We just talked about what data is relevant. How accurate is it? And is it even necessary for the visualization? Structure of the data and structure of the visualizations is very important. Certain data sets are easy to work with, but they may be very difficult in the coding of measures. Okay. Example of that would be the collection of our 2023 data had a column for each different scoring type. So it's easy to get the entry, but it makes it much more difficult for the reporting, where we ended up unpivoting that data so that we could add up multiple types without having to make explicit measures that added those columns together. Formatting. So is it visually appealing? Is it not confusing? Example of this is you got a dashboard and it's got red, yellow, and green, right? And green is associated with something good, red is associated with something that's high risk or a bad event. But often we forget we have colleagues that are colorblind. So you might want to make different sentiment colors that are applicable to people out there that are not that are colorblind and might not be able to differentiate. So formatting is key. All right, so case study that we'll be using today is the Newton 2023 Alliance selection. And so we were part of Alliance 3, we were the first pick. So here's an example of our scout data of all the members of our alliance, including ourselves. This is what it looked like, and I'll let Christian tell you a little backstory with this.
Yeah, so in 2023, even with many years of experience at that point, we found out the hard way that visualization is extremely important. We were selected first pick by the third seed alliance at the World Championship Newton Division in 2023. But while we did have a lot of data, and this specific example is an example of sort of what the data would have looked like. Basically, these are our teammates. This is the information we have. And if you've been doing scouting for a little bit, or you're really into data, with a little bit of understanding the columns and rows, and obviously a full season in, we were able to read this information very well. And when I say we, I mean both me, the students, and some members of our team that had been working with this data and working in this system. We were looking at this data and it was telling us something very, very obvious. But if you have no clue what's going on and you're on a different team and someone came up and showed you this, you're probably going to go, okay, there's numbers. I guess those numbers mean something to you. And they did. They meant something to us. But it didn't mean anything to our alliance captain. And so for quite a few minutes, both during the alliance selection process, getting our third bot and our backup bot, and during match strategies, once we had started playing matches, we were again showing them this data, and they were going, we don't know what this means. Or we don't fully understand, or we don't fully trust, right? I mean, if someone said these numbers mean something, are you going to trust them right away? Probably not. So today we built you an example of what visualization does to that whole situation. If you could switch that, boom. Now there's still a lot of numbers and there's still a lot going on, but if you take a quick second, you've got auton, teleop, intake, and you've got numbers, but that's a whole lot easier to read. And if you look, some of those team numbers are towards the top with more points, more intakes, more scoring, more auton. And then it continues to go down until you get to our last robot on the list, who does unfortunately have the lowest auton, the lowest teleop, and the lowest intake. Hopefully, if you're looking at this graph, that's a whole lot easier to believe, right? If I said, hey, these are the teams, these are the scores, this is telling me that team at the bottom is the lowest at scoring. It's a whole lot easier to believe and comprehend and understand those numbers that we were just showing you, and it's the exact same data. This is the power of visualization. This is the ability to make and help other people understand the numbers that you're looking at.
So guess who the captain of the alliance is? Which one of the 4 teams? Well, 3 if you take us out 1746.
Yes, we were not the alliance captain, but you can probably go ahead and guess who the alliance captain was. Are you ready?
Yeah.
It's 4329.
The one at the very bottom.
The one at the very bottom. That was our alliance captain at the World Championships. Now,
and mind you, they were the 4th seed. So they got enough ranking points to get to the 4th seed
And they,
in selection.
yep, they ended up being the 3rd seed alliance captain at Worlds. With numbers that when you put all the teams in a list, honestly, they were not all that great at the scoring metrics that we were keeping track of. But that doesn't mean you just give up, right? Oh, that's tough. You know, Lions captain may not be as good as you thought they were. You weren't, you know, you're not over here with 1771. Oh no. But you still have to try something. And when we looked at the data and we looked at the numbers, now beautifully visualized, we said, hey, if we substitute our alliance captain, if they substitute themselves out, 5804, who's actually at the top of the teleop and intaking scoring metrics, that was our backup robot. What if we brought them in because they're a higher performing robot? Now, again, what happened was we didn't have this visualization and they didn't really believe us necessarily, right? They were like, we don't know if that's the right choice. We don't know if that's the
Did we
right
lose
option.
you, Christian?
What?
You blanked out for a second.
Oh, sorry. Am I still here? Or?
Yeah, you're still there.
Okay. Where did I leave off? Sorry.
So you're explaining how they came through for us.
Oh, absolutely. So 5804, Torch Robotics, and specifically a kid named Chase, who was their data analytics lead, he came up to the conversation with a laptop with beautiful visualizations and said, hey guys, here's some visualized version of that data. Now, because they were on a different team, now the alliance captains had 2 teams showing them not only the data, but now they had these visualizations that helped them understand what we were talking about. And to kind of wrap up the story, if you did not know, in 2023, they, in the finals of the World's Newton division, the alliance captain chose to sub themselves out and bring 5804, the backup robot, into the playoffs over themselves. And it ended up being an absolutely amazing decision. And 1746 was able to win the Newton division and go to Einstein's, which was a super exciting experience. But honestly, I really do attribute a lot of that to 5804, Chase, and his visualizations that helped us convince the captain to do that. And shout out to the captain as well for stepping out and allowing a backup robot to come in the most intense moment.
Yeah, I'm going to jump out here for a second and show you what that looks like in Power BI and a little bit more behind that. Can you guys see my Power BI screen here?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I created some bookmarks. So at the start of selections, these were the alliance captains. Obviously, 4522 was the first alliance. In round 1, when it came to our alliance captain picking us, this is what they saw. We weren't at the top. We weren't pitiful, but we weren't like ones that were jumping off the board to be picked. We're way down here. But we did get picked. And then we come around to round 2, and it's up to their next pick. So the next pick that they picked was 3184, which had, and Christian, you can explain, I think they were picking off of EPA at the time.
Yeah, so
which is a Blue Alliance metric.
Yeah, it seemed based off how they picked us and how they picked their third bot, the EPA was a number that they were going off of, which and they didn't quite have as much scouting information, so again, it's not like they were during the alliance selection phase looking at this data specifically. They had their own way of doing things, which didn't quite align with what we were saying. But the third team that we picked, 3184, was pretty high on our numbers and was the highest on their list. But you can go ahead and continue with what.
Yeah, so 3184 wasn't a bad pick, but here the final pick, 5804, is screaming on this board to be picked. They're up at the top at the teleop up here, and then they're here on intake. They're not too far off from the auto, so they were like screaming to be picked up, and without the visualization, it was harder for people to even notice that they existed. Finally, we come around snake back around for the third selection, and Chase comes over and says, "You guys really need to pick me." And it shows right here in the numbers. After we've taken all those other teams off the board, here's 5804. They're the top scoring in teleop at that point in time. You see that they're second in just intaking pieces in teleop. And then their auto has creeped up the board. They're ranked 7th out of the remaining robots in auto. So strong pick, very convincing. Had they not come forward, our alliance captain would likely pick another team, as I recall.
Yeah, we were basically at this point. Again, we didn't have the visualizations, but we did have the experience that we were looking at the numbers, and we were basically looking at these numbers and going, "Hey, 5804 is still available. This would be an amazing pickup. Let's be sure we get them." And fortunately for us, as our backup robot on the third seed alliance, 5804 did finally get picked up by us. And then we came back into this whole conversation, and you take these 3 top tier robots. 5804, if I remember correctly, was one of the top 10 to 15 robots according to our data. And we got them as a backup robot, which was crazy.
Yeah, their ranking was like 34 at the time, I think.
Yeah, their ranking wasn't too bad, for Worlds at least.
Yeah.
But they were basically just undiscovered. If I remember correctly, they also had a few not so good matches. But once they got working fully, they were the best team on the alliance, if I'm remembering correctly. And yeah, we took all this information that we had, and we built together these puzzle pieces of information to come up with the idea to have our alliance captains sub themselves out, picked up teams that would work, and it worked. And a miraculous run to make it times followed after that.
Right, now I gotta figure out how to get back to my slide presentation.
I just want to give you guys a time check also. You have
Okay.
like 10 minutes left.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
There we go. I think that's it. All right. Oh,
Too far.
yeah. I'm gonna do something different here. There we go. So Power BI features, it's free, easy to use. It's got 2 layers, unlike Tableau. Tableau will connect to the data source, but it doesn't have the curation part where you can massage the data, transform it. People that use Tableau usually have to do that kind of data prep inside Excel, or they use some other external tool. It uses Power Query, which has a language called M code. Very easy to learn. However, it is low code, no code. So most of what you can do in Power Query is, select on something to execute a step. It brings up a wizard, and you just point it to what columns you want to go against, or what kind of step that you want to apply if you want to aggregate the data or do things like trimming a text column. Interestingly enough, Power Query is actually built into Excel. So if you're familiar with Excel, you can actually go into its data layer and pull in data without having to export have something dumped into a CSV and then copy and paste that into Excel. You can actually use the Power Query layer of Excel to combine multiple pieces of data and form a master data set. So the other layer for Power BI is its actual data model. So once you've got the data collected and curated, it forms tables in essentially an OLAP style database, and the visuals all are built upon that. So in that data model, you can create calculated columns and measures. You can create calculated tables. There's another feature called calculated items. And those are all written in a language called DAX. And so DAX is very similar to a little bit to the way you write formulas in Excel. So there'll be some crossover for anybody that needs to write any DAX. But it is possible to use this tool without writing any DAX at all. It has the ability to create implicit measures. So let's say you have a pie chart and you want an amount to go in there and you want to display it as a percentage, you would just drag that amount field into the field well for that pie chart, and then it would calculate the percentages for you implicitly. It has explicit measures where you can actually define the measure and then put that in the field well, where you define it using the DAX language. There's also a wizard for building your explicit measures, and it has a feature called Quick Measure, where it has some predefined templates for various things. If you like doing year-to-date calculations, anything with time intelligence exists there in the Quick Measures. Another resource that I did not list here is you can actually use GPT now to create your DAX code and possibly even some M code. Filters and slicers. So it has a large variety of slicers. The ones we had on the screen that I just showed you earlier with Power BI, those are all drop downs. But you can have vertical lists, you can have calendar-based ones, you can have hierarchical type slicers or filters. They can be tiles or buttons where you just click on them. You even have ones where you have text and you can search text for specific patterns. Bookmarks. So the feature of bookmark is it saves the visual and data context on your page. That's how I did those various settings of which teams during the selection to quickly show you what the selection data was. I went through there and set the slicers to the appropriate teams, and then I saved the bookmark, and then I was able to retrieve it later on. Bookmarks can also be used in buttons, so I could have created a set of buttons for each of those, and we could have just clicked on those on the screen. Cross-filtering and highlighting. I did not demonstrate that. That's basically if you're in a graph, and drill down as well. If you're in a graph and you see a segment of that pie chart, you want to know, hey, what composed this? Okay, so you can click on that and it could drill down into another sheet and get you the detail, or it could cross highlight other graphs or charts and tables on your screen, highlighting what data that is related to that particular visual. Lastly, we almost done it.
There's two questions people have asked. There's is there free training articles on the software as well, or is it just normal of just documentation of specific commands or formulas?
No, so this is the other advantage of Power BI over Tableau, is that Power BI it is a large community out there. There's a ton of YouTube videos on how to do various things in Power BI, as well as Microsoft has all their learning content available for free. The only thing that Microsoft would charge for is if you're going to go for a certification. So you can download Power BI Desktop for free and use it on your laptop or your desktop computer. No charge.
And then there's a second question also.
Okay.
There is, how would you deal with scouters who aren't completely motivated to perform scouting, like those who get bored of scouting and despite being free, they complain.
we kind of missed that point earlier when we were talking about scouting, and I'll allow Christian to jump here after I say one thing. It is kind of repetitive, sort of like assembly line work at a plant. So at the start of things, people are going to be hyper focused, but after a certain number of matches, they're going to grow tired, or they're not going to be as sharp. So you'll want to set up shifts if you have the head count, and determine at what point people start to fall off in their accuracy. But it might be something, what is it, an hour, and then they start to lose attention after that. So, yep. Christian, what do you think?
I would say the thing that I found the most motivation from and getting the most motivation out of students really is just taking the time to explain how valuable it is, right? And obviously they're not going to watch this whole thing necessarily, but maybe giving them a summarized version and just hey, there's value here. I know you don't maybe necessarily care as a random student on the team, but we can make cool things happen with this data. We can make information that helps us win. And having a good, healthy, competitive outlook, people want to help the team win, I would hope.
Right. So and there's one, and then you can incentivize. And so there's a little folklore with 1746 and 1833 with the garbanzo bean bucks. So they would get garbanzo bean bucks, these fake monopoly money, allocated to them based on how many matches they scored or scouted. And then by the end of the season, we would calculate it up and then award out. And they actually ended up having a garbanzo bean bucks economy. And somebody wrote a white paper or a term paper for one of their classes about the economy of the bean bucks, and Team Bean is named after that incentive, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, Team Bean is named after an incentive that we tried. That incentives are an option, but really getting them to understand is also a good option. And I think there was another question here. We have a minute left, so sorry for rushing through here. How many scouters do you have? I think we would rotate 18 plus scouters, some of which do only qualitative scouting. So instead of tracking numbers and data, they tracked defense, routing, how well they played with teammates. But all in all, our scouting team was 20 to 30 altogether. Some rotating in, they weren't all at the same time. So
want to cover the last slide here?
If anyone else has any more questions, you need to ask now. If
yeah,
not, we can wrap it up.
Get your questions in real quick. Make sure you put that last slide. There's a QR code that should have links and information as well.
So we posted a public Google Drive public share. Through this QR code, you'll get to it. It's got a copy of the presentation. It'll have 2 Power BI reports. Currently, it only has the Blue Alliance API template. I put that up there with some instructions if you want to pull down Blue Alliance data and play around with it in Power BI, or actually make a viable product that can complement what you're doing on your own on your own data for scouting. I will post up the Power BI report for the 2023 Newton qualifications that we use for our demonstration here as well, so you can tear through that and look at what we did, as well as the source file for the data. Any questions before we go?
Just gonna give it one more minute. If there's not one, the next couple seconds, I think we'll wrap it up.
Well, thank you for everybody for attending today. We did have a good turnout. It looked like we had 12 people.
There is one more question. There is,
okay.
Is EPA a quality metric of a robot's performance?
So the Blue Alliance has aggregate measured. It's all based on Alliance. So it's an implied because the Blue Alliance gets all the data that's field data, and field data doesn't know who scored what. It just knows a piece was scored. And so the analysis is that it goes like this. If you have 10 out of 10 matches where scoring was, let's say, 50 points in a particular thing, it will suggest or bias towards you being somehow contributing to those 50 points. And so the EPA and those other OPR and stuff are based off of the Alliance aggregate and are shaped based on how you perform as a team. And so that can back into some metrics, which are better than no metrics at all for a team. But on a robot by robot basis, your scouting data is going to be better than the aggregate.
Thank y'all so much for coming to our presentation. The resource to the Google Drive is available or should be available now. And if you have any questions, there are a few ways to get in contact. I don't know if we want to put something in the Google Drive that's just like open questions, but we're 3 minutes over time, so we need to go ahead and wrap up here. But I'm also on the Peachtree Discord, the PCH Discord. Scouting and strategy both have a channel, so you can reach out there to me if you have any questions. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.